So welcome everybody. I'm going to be recording this part of our assessment work together in our live class because there's some great content knowledge that we're going to cover. We are into week 2, session 2 of CHCLEG003. And tonight we're working on the project. Last week, we worked really and did a lot of great work around task 2, which were the 4 case studies, and we unpacked that for you to be able to work on. But tonight, it is about the project side of it. There's a lot around a project, so I want to record this bit for you. The class is empty at the moment because everybody's gone off to a breakout room. But what I wanted to do for you to keep for yourself, even if you are here tonight, or for those of you who could not make it tonight, I wanted to make sure that we shared that with you as well. So let me just share my page and I'll let you know what I've asked everyone to go into the breakout room and do. Okay. So me being a non-tech person, the room numbers are different to the question numbers, but everyone's gone into their room with just their set question. So we're talking about equal employment opportunity. That means fairness for all. We refer to this as an EEO, and part of this task is that you are going to design and create your very own equal employment opportunity policy and procedure. Now, you have your simulated workplace, which is first access on your dashboard. When you go into your instructions for this task, it will guide you in there. You keep that as one of your favorites, just tag that because you're going to go in and out of that first access site at least 50 times during your diploma. All the templates sit in there, the policies and procedures. It's not always a perfect system. So if you get a little stuck, use your search bar when you go in and just pick out a keyword. With this one, I would just drop into the search bar EEO. I'll see if I can do that at the end of my recording for class tonight. So with this sector, the breakout rooms we don't record, but I've asked for people to come back with what is the definition of harassment? What does that mean for the people in that room? And they're going to come back and share that. Is this true or false? The next one is, it's okay to ignore an employee's reasonable accommodation request. That's an adjustment if it's inconvenient. And then the third group are going to go, what steps should you take to report an EEO complaint? And then who would be that person? Could we describe that client? As learners doing the Diploma of Community Services, it's quite likely that you may experience this in the workplace yourself. You may be witness to someone experiencing this. You may have these policies and procedures, or you may have a lived experience where you know of a place where you work where this did happen and it went really well or it went very badly. So we want your views around this because you're going to be designing a document. And then we're going to come back and we're going to discuss each of those in our summary, and then we're going to have a break, and then we're going to come back and start unpacking this project. For those people near to. We're going to have a bit more of a discussion around presenting a real life case study. We'll have an example. That may come out of our breakout rooms and we'll pick that up so that we know where would this be applied. And I think the ideal scenario will be someone with all of those needs in those 3 questions, that there's a person that is being harassed, but they don't see it as harassment, or the organisation doesn't. So it's either the employee or the employer's experience. It may be our client, but we're talking about fair work practices here, your legal and ethical rights, the employer's legal and ethical rights, and how that overflows onto our clients anyway. But some of our clients may be having this exact lived experience, and they come to you as a caseworker. I'm stuck. I'm really struggling with things that are going on at work, and I really don't think that I can stay there. What would be an example of those things? We know that people get hired on their skills, their knowledge and their skills, but they quit based on attitude and culture, or they get let go because of attitude that isn't in step. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It just isn't in step with that culture. Some people leave because there's a change of ownership, they've got a different vision. Some people leave because they're changing areas, or they've gone as far as they can and they want to try new challenges. That might mean that you get something that has more or less responsibility, that is more or less money, because to take less money would give you a unique opportunity to go somewhere else. So even around an EEO, you can have a resume that actually it promotes you too well. Sometimes you'll see a resume and you go, I think they might be bored with this. I remember not that long ago, it would only be 3 or 4 years ago, where I applied for a position, and it wasn't much. It was only about 10 hours a week, and I could fit it in with my other things because I have a fair bit of flexibility in my job outside of Hader, and actually even in my job with Hader, the nights work, really well for our classes. But I knew the CEO, and she just said, oh, you're going to be bored out of your brains. And for some reason, I wasn't able to describe or explain well enough that, yes, I know it would be a no-brainer, but I hadn't actually worked with that target group. I had good theory and knowledge around it, but I hadn't experienced it. One of the things that I know about myself for certain is that I am a hands-on learner, experiential learner. So the reading, it sits in, the listening to others, that definitely does, the visual and that, but the actual doing, that seems to stick with my learning more. You'll do that with work placement, or I strongly encourage you. If you're feeling confident, I've just sent out 32 people from this exact class and recommended them to be going out into work placement, because it brings your knowledge to life. But if you're applying for a job and you are far enough through your diploma, then you may get an opportunity to be a level entry worker. Midway through a diploma is equivalent to a Cert 4. It depends on the funding, what they're looking for. It's either they want university, tertiary, even though a diploma is tertiary education, by the way. Anything post high school, anything over Cert 3 is viewed as tertiary, because it's worth credit transfers to go into university. So a diploma with experience can actually take 8 units off a 24-unit degree. Depending on what you're going to study, and depending on what evidence you can provide to support why they should recognise your equivalence, your knowledge, and they see you beyond. So you can take a full 12 months off a uni degree by completing a diploma. You might not want to go from your diploma and do more study. Some people go from one diploma and do another, and half of it's already done, because half of your diploma is core units. But I want you to think about, how could I use what I'm studying in a job right now? When you go for an interview, they're going to look at your resume. A good resume gets you an interview. Otherwise, it's just a piece of paper that's your story. We write our resume for the person who's reading it. And we put some things in and we leave some things out. We don't necessarily have to do January to September, I worked in this, you can break it down into specific areas. They use just a tech suite now, HR, it's a great tool. In their ad, they've got the keywords. If your keywords are in the resume and your cover letter, they ask for a cover letter, then you need to look at their ad thoroughly and their position description and make sure that they are in your resume and in your cover letter. So the equal employment opportunity, I was qualified to take that position. However, I didn't apply for it. I made the phone call. You usually have a phone number, and I knew the person. So I said, what would it mean? What's it like? I have 10 hours. She just said, you're going to be bored out of your brains, and I don't want to put you in and then have to go and recruit again because you pick it up quickly and you'd only need a couple of weeks. So she said, why don't you come in and do some volunteer for us? We'll bring you in and you come in and run some training for us in-house. And then why don't you go on a couple of road trips with some of them and be part of that and shadow it? Will that give you what you're looking for? And it was. So I was really grateful because she didn't see it as a yes or a no. She was able to get to, because she's a sector worker, what's the root cause? What do you really want? And what's your why? So when we're in equal employment opportunity, there's no complaint there. But if I'd applied and I'd been knocked back, it couldn't be based on my qualifications or my clearances or anything like that. On paper, I really should get an interview. But when there is a phone number to call, I encourage you to do that, but make sure you've got some really good equal employment opportunity questions. Is there an age cap on this? Do you, and which of course is illegal to say anything different, but it's like, who do you think your person is that you're looking for? Ask some of those questions as well. They encourage you. For me, it's about time. How many hours a week is it? Can I job share it with one or two other people? Have they got that in mind? How much travel is involved? Because, I run another program and I like to be on call and in the same postcode or prep people to take my place. So I don't want to be ad hoc and on the road. So what is it for you? What is it for you around being considered, or what would you think that they would rule you out for? Is it that your experience just doesn't match what they're looking for? And do you know how to design what you're applying for over in to make sure that you're not excluded, you have an equal employment opportunity as well? This one is about you designing the policy. The policy is what says whether you can apply for something, or if you've got the job, whether you can ask for a reasonable adjustment. So as a neurodivergent person, I know that if I had a wheelchair user in our team, then we would make those reasonable adjustments for that person. But because neurodivergent person is, it can be invisible, not completely. There's lots of little quirky little things, but there's quirky things in everyone. If you talk to the neurodiversity, like the community, they'll say everyone's neurodivergent, but there's neurotypical and neurodivergent as well, and then ADHD in there as well. So when you look at that, what adjustments would you make for an invisible thing? No wheelchair, but what else would we need to do? And true or false, it's okay to ignore an employee's reasonable accommodation request if it's inconvenient for the workplace. So for it to be fair, for us to accept our responsibilities, we would say that up front. I identify as neurodivergent. It doesn't bother me now, but I would mask that previously. Your social norms, how to fit that in. You would do whatever you could. practice and routine and structure are pretty important, but a lot of change, rapid change, good in a crisis, but it can keep you in that heightened state. And then, you know, well-meaning comments, which, you know, absolutely unintentional, can come up as well. Things like, oh, I never really understand what you're saying. And in some situations, you know, you've really just got to say, you know, you can't say that to me. What you can say to me is, could you help me understand that better? Could you explain that? What is it that you mean? You can definitely come back and say that, but you can't say, yeah, look, and use that as a reason why other people don't understand you. That also is not okay. So we wouldn't say, oh, well, yes, we know there's 10 steps, but you're just going to have to work out how to get up. You shouldn't go for this job if your wheelchair doesn't make it up those steps. So the legislation is very clear on discrimination. And so is an equal employment opportunity. That's the foundation for someone being included or excluded. Okay, so I'm hoping that you find that helpful. We'll just see. Our group should be thinking about coming back fairly soon. And we will go back and revisit it. Just here at the beginning, I showed the class, and I promised everyone that I would do that, that here is the framework for writing this equal employment opportunity policy and procedure. You're going to adjust it. It's in your porthole and it's stepped out in the template. So here is what it is. You've got to put in the scope and the objectives, the values and the commitment. And when the class are finished, I'm going to unpack that when we come back from our break. Some will stay and some I'll just make sure that we get this out, and I'll continue to record it for you, and I'll unpack all of this. We'll be in a live class and I'll unpack it, but I'll unpack it for everyone who couldn't be here tonight or needed to step out earlier. So let's just circle back for a moment and see where everyone's up to, if they've made it out of their breakout room. Oh, here's Rachel's group. And I will hit pause, she says. Okay, over to Rachel's group.
So we talked about the definition of harassment. We talked about the definition first and then the types of harassment and what Australian law it kind of revolved around as well. So we defined it as basically unwanted behaviour that's offensive, intimidating, humiliating, threatening, and kind of creates a hostile environment to the person experiencing it. And the types of harassment can be sexual harassment, verbal harassment, physical harassment, workplace harassment, so kind of putting it into environments as well, and also online harassment or cyberbullying. And we talked about also how things can, you know, it can be different levels of harassment, and it can also escalate really quickly as well. We talked about how it affects the clients and what type of clients you would see, especially, you know, family violence would see a lot of physical and sexual harassment, or pretty much all harassment, you know, but online harassment might be more prominent in school-age children as well. And then we kind of talked around what laws the harassment breaches and how it's very closely linked in with discrimination as well. But it breaks the Equal Opportunity Act. I know in Victoria, I think it's called the Fair Work Act as well. And then also it ties in with the Australian Human Rights Commission Act. And, you know, it can be discriminating or harassment against race, gender, sexual orientation, disabilities, all of the discrimination acts kind of tie in with that harassment as well.
Okay, that's great. That sounds very comprehensive. Did anyone in your group share that they had an experience feeling harassed in the workplace?
No one shared specifically, but we did talk about what it could happen in the workplace, and also what could happen in your personal life as well. So we kind of went with both avenues.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. Great. Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Rachel, and your group. Could I just ask, someone's got their mic on and we are recording. If they'd be good enough to just turn the mic off, that'd be fabulous. It's a happy noise. No one sounds like they're getting harmed. But yeah, we'll just get that in the background. All right, so room 2 or whatever room that is. Dadi, would you like to tell us what your group were working on?
Yeah, we were just working upon the steps of the complaint. So we didn't had a case, but we're just going normally how we'll go about. So we just said like maybe identify the issue if the person comes, what's going on, and maybe just actively listening for the person. And then I think me and Lisa were just talking like, do we file a complaint first and then gather evidence about it? So, and we also were like, I think what else we said, we also gave the point that we can't say that, like, is it right or wrong? Like person who comes in, we just have to give that like just a neutral basis. I think that's what we said. And maybe
we also spoke about assessing the situation when a complaint comes in and the impact of it that has in the working space and what can be done. And if, well, we also said that we could informally speak to the person if he or she is okay. And then maybe if the issue has to be escalated, we can escalate the issue to the superiors, supervisor, and then probably come for a resolution, and also make clear when someone comes with a complaint, the policies and procedures of the organization or the workplace they are working in, and then try and neutralize the conversation, not by just taking a side, because obviously, like everybody said, there are two sides to a coin, so we can't just blindly believe what one person is saying. And then probably look at the records or the evidences, or if or we were discussing if someone comes up with a complaint and he or she doesn't have an evidence, like if it's a verbal abuse and if there's nobody there, there is no chat record or email or message or something, what would be the scenario then? Because obviously this person is hurt and they think that they are not safe or something like that happens. So what would be the measure that would be taken? And Connie said that in the health department sometimes there is a situation where people get, like, I don't know what the exact word for that is, but something like a stress leave that people get. They get paid, but they get to go home while the case is investigated. Or there was discussions like that. What would be the case if someone has to be suspended or sent back home in order to get time for investigation and things like that, and then resolve the situation or the complaint with reasonable evidences and things like that. Yep.
Yes. So that's great. Sounds really thorough. It's about the complaint. So the whistleblower protection policy in First Access is the person who makes the complaint. Even if it is anonymous, they're protected if they're making the complaint on someone else's behalf. But everything starts with an inquiry. So like what Dadi said, like you get the information first, like that two sides to the coin. If there's two people, then there's two perspectives. Even if they both witnessed and they were there at the same time, it will be a different view because we have a different worldview and we have a different response or a reaction to different things. What does that mean to one group could mean something completely different to another group. In the beginning of the intro, I talk about the invisible side of that discrimination or harassment around it, what can be a flippant kind of a comment around someone who's neurodivergent, like, oh, I don't really understand what you mean. You can't actually say that to somebody because it would be viewed as not equal, because they wouldn't say that to a person who had English as a second language. I don't really understand you. Why don't you speak properly? Then it's like saying how that person's cognitive processing is and how they describe things. So it ends up being, it's usually ignorance. And ignorance isn't a rude thing. It just means I'm missing information. So that brings you into raise awareness, education, better information, reminders around it. What is abuse and harassment? You know, Rachel's group. And then how do you make a complaint that could still be on the same poster? Like, we know that if you go into some public toilets and in say an airport or in a hotel or something, if sexual harassment's up there, you know, have you, and here are the steps, and here you can call, you know, they put those in discreet places as well. But people need to know what is the definition of harassment or abuse. And then if you think that's happening, what could you do about that? So everything starts with an inquiry. Then if the inquiry has got some traction to it, moves to a complaint, and then the complaint moves into an investigation, and then the investigation is looking for an outcome. So it could be mediation, a meeting of the minds, like you say, someone goes off work for a while on full pay while the investigation is happening. It could be conciliation, where you actually come together and you need an arbitrator in it, or it goes to the court process where it's a civil matter, and someone else, based on all the evidence, diarise everything all the time. I tell you to keep a journal, but in your journal, it will also have lots of other things. I write everything down because you shouldn't rely on your memory. Or you might give a statement and you go, oh, actually, I forgot about that. And it comes back to you later. Just put your dot points, your key points in there. It's there. It's a protective behavior. We do that. So you may be sharing that to a colleague, but you may also be sharing that for your clients. This sounds really hard for you. What have you been doing to cope? Just finding that out first. And like, would it be helpful, and some people have found it helpful, to start writing things down? It gets it out of your mind and it puts it on a piece of paper, and it's a good way as a record. And you can start to see, look, that was a one-off, or that hasn't happened, or gosh, every full moon everyone goes troppo here, sort of thing. So it's like you're starting to get a pattern of behavior. What is that? And trying to make sense of something at the moment that does not yet make sense. Yeah. Okay, great. And with Michelle, Michelle, yours was a kind of tricky one, actually. They all are, but this one's interesting. True or false? What did your group come up with?
Well, first of all, true. It was a tricky one. So, because this week it's about writing the equal opportunity policy. The first thing I did, because I have all the policies sitting here on First Access, and I feel that they're aligned, these two policies. So it says background, but I read the purpose of the policy for inclusion and diversity. Because I felt a little bit about that was really relating to this question. So we did that and we started to talk about it, but everyone's perception of the question was very different. So there was this open discussion for a while in relation to that. And then Tanika actually did a search on a person's accommodation request, where she found specifically what an accommodation request in the workplace was, and she read that out. So then that opened up the conversation. So it's usually a person with a disability. Is that correct? We got that right?
Yep.
Yeah. And we discussed examples of that. So collectively, I think that there is no, it's not okay to ignore a person's accommodation request if it's inconvenient. Definitely not.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, so
You're right
um,
about the disability. There can be occasions, but they're
mhm,
not so much the body of your policy and procedure. It may have a under Fair Work, people are entitled to compassionate leave.
mhm,
And so it might be case by case. So some things, yes, you've got to have, the core of that policy.
mhm,
And then you've got to have variations. But no one can say yes or no to something unless it aligns with Fair Work Australia, the
mhm,
legislation, the human rights, or sitting inside the policies and procedures. So it could be someone puts in for leave, an employer can rescind that leave and say, look, I know
mhm,
I approved it, but we've got this, this, and this coming up, and therefore I have to actually decline that. Now,
mm,
the employer can do that. And what the court would view when it got to that stage was, if it creates a hardship for the employer, then it is reasonable for them to decline.
okay, yeah. So when we were looking at it in relation to a disability, the answer was a hard no. But
Yeah.
we did say that before we got to that point, before Chanika searched it, there were other examples, and we were like, well, you know what? It's got to be fair and reasonable, and that decision can't be made on the basis of, you know, their sex, their race, their age, etc., etc. And another thing too is you have to be very, very careful that if you're agreeing to something to one person, that you don't set a precedent that then, becomes an unwritten contract or policy that you've
I
opened up.
know. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So we spoke about that.
The myths that run,
Mm,
oh, look, they don't, or this, and it's like passed
mm,
down, where it's
mm,
like, is that right? Or the policies
mm,
say this. So it depends on the person. Some people, oh yeah, but it's me. A bit like last week where we were talking about Tom and Ben, and but
mm,
we're mates, and like, I'll be better
mm,
prepared if I know what she said in the investigation. You're right about the discrimination, but discrimination is both ways. Discrimination can actually be favoring or
mm,
actually excluding someone. It can go both ways.
mm,
Shanika.
We also just acknowledged as well, like, the transparency around making the accommodations based on like what's listed in like your position description and your targets. So they being met if you are to be dropping a day or changing your hours and those kind of things as well, and just playing to the scope of the role.
Yes,
mm,
100%. Like, everybody will, it's like, I need the team to step up and do a little bit more. The team, if it's formed, will definitely do that, but it can't be keep moving it. So the law is, you cannot ask someone to change their position description by more than 15% for more than 2 weeks. That's it.
mm,
That's the
mm,
law. And if someone was away, or things changed, and somebody then gets given more as a, short-term solution, and that becomes the norm, that actually, you cannot do that. It sits outside the equal employment opportunity. So if someone has a similar job to you, and yet they're not being asked to do the same thing, so, oh, that's just how they are, and we don't
mm,
worry about that. Or if someone's 2 minutes late at work, but someone's consistently late, but they never say anything to that person. But the first time this person's ever late, it's like they notice it. And so that would be unfair. And that's what
mm,
Fair Work Australia is all about. But it's subtle. Harassment
mm,
is subtle. It can
mm,
be what people feel or perceive, and it could be completely incorrect. So
mm.
that's why it's always good to ask the question, have I got this right? I just sort of sense there's something a little off center, and I was just wondering if there's something that I could do. And if you do kind of mess it up and you just think, wow, I don't think that landed the way I wanted it to, it's like, yeah, like, I get efficient in my wording, and so some feedback I get from the team is, I'll just say, here's all my pleases and thank yous now, because I'm not going to get to them till about 4 o'clock this afternoon. So just here's cake. Have a great day. Here's all the please and thank yous, and the rest of the day is just going to be weird. But we'll check back in with each other. So I like to do a check-in and a check-out with my team, regardless of what team I'm in. But it can come through a little whatever. Now, if you're used to it, it's like, yep, we're good, no worries. But if it's unexpected, then it's like you're still forming in your team. That's the team culture. And it doesn't mean that it can be dismissed. When you do performance appraisals, when you're sitting there with your supervisor, and you should do a good best practice is that we do performance appraisals every 3 months. So we do one-on-ones. I do one-on-ones with the Hader team. We do them every week. They're informal. We don't record them. Then monthly we do a meeting. We do keep minutes for those. So we have a speak freely one. Then we have a formal one that's COP, which is community of practice, our standards. We'll bring up an agenda or a particular thing we're working on. You'll do that in your workplace as well. But we need to bring up these things. What do we do if, rather than put the spotlight on someone, what would I do if is a great way to start off. What's our policy like? And this one is, you've got to identify there's gaps and you've got to write it. So you've got to compare it and say, I've used the framework of first access, but I heard group 2, sorry, the last group that spoke, Michelle's group, I heard you say that you actually aligned another policy in there as well. It can be more than one. And where's the implementation around it? So use your template for this as, have I answered something in each of these as well? Okay, so we are up to break time. I'll just pause now. So we're back out of the breakout room and over to you, Shanika.
So within our room, there was kind of a lot of discussion about resources that you can look to clarify things or just get an understanding of your rights and your entitlements as a worker. So like Fair Work and the likes of that. We also talked a little bit, now I'm not super educated on this myself. There was a bit of discussion as well around unions within the sector, because a question was asked whether or not you could just bypass your company in general and go straight to seeking legal advice.
Yeah.
And obviously that is an option, but like Michelle made known that it's a pricey option, and there are other avenues. So it was discussed a little bit as well about the alternative avenues you can go to for those answers and the advice of your company. Sorry, what comes in that process as well, and in terms of making those complaints. Michelle probably has a little bit more to add on to that in terms of the group discussion. Michelle, what else am I missing out on here? Drawing a blank.
Shanika, look at you. Like, I didn't even know you were in my group.
Quiet. It was just absorbing.
I was going to come back and say, like, there was some amazing feedback there, and you know what? Everyone was throwing stuff in. So, you know what? I'd like other people to have a voice and like just tell us a little bit about, like Liza. Do you want to elaborate?
Oh, about what we discussed?
Yeah, and specifically the things that you mentioned.
Okay, so what I'll say what I mentioned first, because this was about a data leak, about the complaint getting leaked. So what I was talking about was, when we enter into a work, there obviously a contract is drawn up where they specifically say that there is a confidentiality in everything, especially your data and information, and there's things that said that it will be addressed and it will be very confidential. So if my complaint gets leaked, if my organization is of no use, like if they're not listening to what I'm saying or something, what I suggested is, it can't we not go for a legal thing by ourselves, rather than depending on the company's policies and waiting for them to react. But then obviously Michelle and any of the others said that it will cost us, and then someone else came up saying that just like the nurses has something like a union to back up where they pay them fortnightly or monthly, there's a payment that, but they come forward when there if an issue comes up, they're always there to back you up. So
Hmm.
rather
Yeah,
than going,
it was to dig, and
yeah,
she talked from the perspective of that she has been a union delegate or
yeah,
union rep. I forget which one it was. Yeah, so she brought that up, which was really, really good. We also discussed what sort of workplace is this, and how strong do we think their policy and their culture is when someone can just grab a key and go into a HR office and get a file. Like, there's some serious gaps, not just in private and confidentially, but the culture of the place and
You're right. The
things like
culture
that.
is one, they could get access, but the other is now they've got access to it. What does Kelly's day feel like? And what are all the people that like Kelly? How do they feel about what's happened to Kelly as well? Like, so it impacts everybody. It has an overflow with that. And it's very
Yeah.
important. So I would have to deny access to the person that may be making it uncomfortable, even if I haven't got the full story. They'd be on full pay, but I am a union. I am a member of my union, but I didn't join my union until much later, and it was a big deal for me to do that. You've got the right to or not to. I like it now for the professional development, but you get free legal advice. You only get 20 minutes unless they really like you and you're on the phone for an hour and a half. But you haven't got any protections with harassment and that. Proving it is difficult, but harassment must be persistent, consistent. Can't be just that one off. All right. So it's like personality clash, but we don't sweep it under. There's 3 strikes and you're out kind of thing. 3 strikes and now I make the inquiry. 3 strikes and now I lodge a complaint. So remember in the story with Kelly, there was kind of like started to say certain things and then said they confiscated the porn, and then the next thing complimenting on the personal clothing, and then there was uninvited touch that made Kelly feel comfortable. So it escalated, happened over a period of time, and Kelly tried to cope with that herself. So, and then of course she said, I've got to go. I'm calling in sick. I've got to go straight away. So she denied that person access to them. And that's the most important thing when you're ever feeling targeted, is vote with your feet. Straight away, end it. Do not give that person any oxygen or access. So deny access. That's a protective thing. The same as if you're attending an accident in the street. The first thing that you're going to do is make sure that you deny other vehicles to be driving past there, that kind of thing. So, so you minimize the harm, and the best way is you can't make someone stop doing what they're doing. All you can do is report, and those who have the authority make that person stop doing it. How do you know they can't do it? It's based on the policies and procedures and the legislation. So we might have something where it's like, oh, you should, can't you take a joke and things like that? But no, you cannot. And I was doing a case study with somebody when you were in the breakout room. We were talking about how you could say one thing to one person and you would never say it to another person. Why would it be okay to say it to that person? And it's like, oh, I don't mean anything by it. But it's not actually about what their intention is. It's about how the other person receives it. But if you don't say, look, that's actually not okay. And so, like happened to me. So I can share that. I just said, you can't talk to me like that. And it was kind of like a written thing. And then it was like something came back, and I said, no, you can't say that to me any more than you could say to someone who's got English as another language. why don't you speak properly? I don't understand you. You would not say it to them. You cannot say that to me. And it's like, oh, I didn't mean anything by it. It's just that sometimes you. So I just said, it sounds like you've got a real problem with that. What can I do to help you? And here's a truckload of information about working with a neurodivergent person. Now, if I was a worker and not a manager, would that be a problem for me? Is there an imbalance of power? Is it safe to be able to say those things? And 100% not intentional. I can tell you straight up. So those things get dealt with in-house. And it's like, oh, I didn't mean anything by it. It's like, I know you're a good person and I really like you. But you still can't say it to me. I still have to let you know that if I suck it up, if I swallow it, it will bother me. It will sit there, and it's kind of like unfinished business, isn't it? So with Kelly, she ran. She didn't just quit, she ran. And it seemed that because she was relatively new and she had good ethical code about her, she was very committed to the clients and seemed like she was quite loyal to the organization. So she had the best of intentions. And it is, I'm not sure who said it, but someone said, you're the only people there. So it will come down to that saying, he said, she said, but the person that makes the decision, based on all the information I have available, it would be a reasonable decision to believe that this is what happened. So it's how we conduct ourselves in this. And I want to give you a tool. And this tool is about sandwiching. Those who are doing casework know what I'm talking about here. So when we do sandwiching, you have the bread on top and it finishes things off. You have bread on the bottom, that's your base, and it holds it all together. That's what policies and procedures are. You are backed up always by a code of conduct, whether it's formal or informal, volunteered, no pay, yes being paid, a visitor, a client to the centre, anything at all like that. Then you have your filling in the middle. You say what you've got to say and you mean what you say. As well within the guidelines in an assertive way. And there's a difference between assertive and aggressive. So choose your words carefully and have a think about it. There's a couple of things that just about cover any topic, no matter what it is. And then put the bread on top. I hope we can move forward. Or if you're the person who needs to have that sandwich, served up to you, then just say, I don't think I handled that very well at all. So look, can I circle back and try and fix that? Be that person. If you know it, if you sense it, can I just check in and see whether that was okay? So sometimes I might forget I'm not with my regular team and Hader and everyone's away. We have no water cooler conversations, no chats in staff rooms when you're remote. And that actually adds up to something in the workplace as well, that human connection. But we try and connect. And if it's all work and no soft sort of social stuff, we can miss putting those deposits in so that if someone's having a rough day, they can make a couple of withdrawals because they've made plenty of deposits. Like, I'll let that one slide. You're normally 100% amazing. But if they keep taking withdrawals, yeah, look, you're overdrawn right now. So now I've got to put a line in there and I've got to let you know that was my line. And it doesn't mean that someone else, it wouldn't be their line, but for you, we must put voice to that. Kelly did not put voice to that. She quit, but then whoever picked her up and the organization circled back and said, what's going on? She just didn't want another roster and that. So a good organization will ask the questions. Is there something I'm missing? Ask the open-ended question. Can I talk to you about this? I'm not clear on it, and I just feel as if there might be something more. So because she's upset, use the feeling word. If it's about protocol, use the think. What do you think would have been a better way to handle it? But if it's the person that's being harmed, then it's like, how do you feel about what was going on? Ask the feel. If you want to work with your clients, you want to get to that social, emotional, psychological well-being, use the feeling question. if you want to bring them back on track, what do you think? Is there something that you think we might have missed there? What do you think we could do next? Or I think we need to get it here, and I think we could pick that up later. For those of you who have yet to do the unit that we did, CHCLEG003, that's a big communication unit. It's about an incident that didn't get reported. And then it's about getting people to come to a meeting and, you know, what did the organisation do after the incident? So things happen in the workplace, but it's how we listen to the person and believe and acknowledge and respectfully. And then what will happen? What's the action to fix that? It's so important for your clients to know that they are not alone in that space when they're going through something. And sometimes we almost have to go through that ourselves to feel what it's like for our clients sitting in the chair. What's okay and what's not okay. And the people who will do that, they're the ones that go, I'm okay and you're not okay. And your clients will go, I'm not okay, but you're okay. Or everyone else is okay. So just have a think about processing that when we're getting there. This was more than Kelly being upset because Thomas thought it was funny and things like that. Thomas actually gave a completely different version of events, didn't he? Thomas said, she forced herself on me and she just got in first. Now that's not what our scenario says, but that could have happened. So we must give Thomas airplay. But this action, instead of Thomas allowing the process to take due course, and that's what the organisation must do, they failed. They had gaps, security gaps, privacy gaps, but at least they got Kelly to be able to circle back with that as well. So for anyone that has been on the receiving end or thinks that they could have handled something differently, think about how does that fit in the workplace? And if you think you have done something that you could do better, and that's what your question was, it's like, what do we do well and what could we do differently? Circle back and fix it, because I can tell you it just keeps growing. It's like an infection. A bad culture must be dealt with. Can I talk to you about this thing? And be the person that does have that conversation. And like I said, in workplace, we cannot be witness to it either without saying or doing something about it. Are you okay? That's our duty of care to our peers as well. When we've got a client, then we're going to say, that sounds tough. Are you okay? Right here, right now. So this is what rights are in action as well. So every culture, whether you're brand new or not, you have the exact same rights as anyone that's been there for a long time.
And Vicky, that when you're saying, are you okay, that needs to be regardless of while that investigation takes place. So Thomas could potentially, at the end of this, you know, he could even, you know, get fired and whatever. But during that process, we must also reach out to the three of them, shouldn't we? To
Yes.
make sure.
Thomas would be getting counselling.
Regardless, yeah.
So this is about EEO, equal employment opportunity, and you've raised that. Thomas has the right, equal opportunities in this process, because we were not there and we aren't conducting the investigation. We're navigating the policies and procedures. And were there gaps? Were there gaps in there? And if we can identify them, what did we do well? What do we need to do differently? And we have to do that with ourselves as well. Could I have handled that better? Probably. I may have to go back in and do something about that. Yeah, and look, if people are under pressure, they forget. And that's where the deposits and withdrawals come in. If you've got a relationship with someone and there's plenty of deposits, you're going to let that go. And you might say, are you okay? Do you need cake? or something. It just depends on what your relationship is like with them. But on the same hand, if you've been saying and there's a pattern of behavior, and that's what harassment is, it's persistent and consistent, then it becomes, otherwise it's not, it's about the code of conduct, not appropriate. So there's quite a distance between a legal matter or working against the Industrial Relations Act under Fair Work Australia and something that is, just awkward. Shanika.
Okay, I just want to add something to what you're saying. So I did in my workplace, we have effective communication training, and I actually learned for the first time about that emotional banking system, which is what you're referring to now. I don't know if anyone else isn't aware of it, but I found it so interesting. It's one of those things you can dive down the rabbit hole of finding understanding and more research on the subject. So if you're not sure what that is that Vicky's referring to, it's definitely worth looking up. It just creates a new perspective to the exchanges you have with people.
Yeah, and in that training, Shanika, there's tanking as well. So what we can have is people can kind of hold it all together all day, and they've kept it in this vessel, but then the tank can overflow and they've saved it all up until they've got somewhere where they actually think they can get away with it, or it's safe to do so. In a child, it's kind of it's interesting where they go, oh, if I said that at school, I get my head punched in. So you've brought it home? Yeah, because it's okay to say it here. It's not okay to say it here. And so what do you say? You don't have permission to speak to me like that. So, like from 2 years of age, my kids have all grown up. They know how to say those things. Their toolkit is clear. So it's like, do you want me to come in or can you handle it? Like, I don't go into the school unless everything in their toolkit has been expended. And usually it's my kids that are in the wrong, and those tools didn't work. So it's like, they got tools.
Yeah, another thing can I add to that,
Thanks,
a good
Nika.
workplace will be robust in expectation and behaviours in a workplace. So if you're sitting there in front of a work safe inspector and they ask you for specific policies on expectation of behaviours, and you go, well, they're an adult, they should know not to do that. Bum bum. It's just
That's right. But what is really the problem, and it's rarely what you think it is. I can see it and go, okay, that person, most things it's fear-based. The louder, the more aggressive it is the greater the fear. And I know that's a really difficult lens to put on, but I want you to try it. I want you to have a think about when someone is really like that, the insecurity is strong, and the fear is high.
And can I just add one more thing?
Yeah.
We got distracted because Ruth was holding the most gorgeous little baby.
Have you got that baby, or is someone going to take it, Ruth? Did they take that baby off you?
Yeah, no, I apologise for that. My daughter was in a panic. She was
trying to apologise. It was
for the children in the bath. So she just handed the baby and said, Mum, can you just hold the baby for a minute and get the wind out of it? So I was sitting there, but the baby wasn't comfortable and started to cry. So she regathered the baby. So I apologise for that interruption. It was an just a quick little emergency call.
Was that a good interruption?
How old is the baby?
It's only 4 weeks.
Oh,
so it's a new addition to the collection of noisy babies, children I got.
Oh, Ruth, I can't believe that the baby's only 4 weeks old, because it does not seem like long ago when you were saying we've got another one. Sort of, really, wow.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's kind of cute. So, what a nice interruption as well. We've got to remember that when we come in here, we are friends and colleagues. We create a culture as well. So you brought the human into the space, and we really appreciate that.
Yeah, it was unexpected. She just quickly said, Mum, can you hold the baby?
I loved it.
Yeah. And puppies. We'll take puppies and babies, if you like, as well. So Look,
Yeah.
I'm going to wrap up our class. I'm still recording, and I'll wind that up. I'm going to hit pause and do a summary later, and just follow up with some paperwork, and open the floor up now for anyone that would have some questions. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I just wanted to do a summary over our assessment part that we did tonight. We've had some rich discussion around this, and I wanted to unpack task 3 for us, the project, about writing the new EEO, the Equal Employment Opportunity Policy, as part of your assessment task. So let me just step you through it. What must be included? So we give you the template. It talks about the scope. Scope says define who the policy applies to: all employees, contractors, volunteers. The scope means what coverage, and also what it doesn't cover as well. Include coverage of recruitment, workplace practices, and reasonable accommodation, because that's what EEO is. What are your objectives? Clearly outline the goals of the policy. For example, preventing discrimination, promoting diversity, creating a culturally safe workplace for diverse members of our organisation. Values and commitment, state the organisation's principles. You'll find that on First Access's dashboard, their website. And dedication to fairness, respect, and inclusion. So that might look like First Access holds these things as their values base and their mission statement. They're dedicated to fairness, respect, and inclusion. That's an example. Key terms and definitions. That means you might start using some language that is unique to your service sector. In the community services, acronyms are, they're commonly used. And especially new staff or new board members, it's like, I need a key, I need a code that tells me what each of those things, you shorten them. Like your award under the community service sector is the SHADS award, SCHADS, which stands for Social, Community, Housing and Disability Services. So that's what the SHADS award is, but we call it the SHADS. So we get used to saying different shorter versions of things. So that's what your key terms and the definitions are. Provide a clear explanation, such as discrimination, harassment, victimization, diversity, and reasonable accommodations. So you could put that into your policy under, this is what they each mean, and do your research around that and just put that in. So it's like, oh, that's what those things are. So a good policy is one that's clear to everybody, not make assumptions or presumptions that everyone should know this, because they do not. Some people will have policies and procedures in big folders everywhere, but they just may as well use them to keep a door open as a doorstop. Rarely do people go back in there and do that. I love policy because policy gives me a guideline. And if I'm ever in doubt, I go, I wonder if I'm getting that right, I just refer back to the policies and procedures and I'll go, okay, I think that's all right. I don't want to run to my supervisor all the time. When we start a new position, it can get pretty daunting. But if it's also very technical, one of the learners stayed back tonight and we were talking about what does that mean and where do I find that information? Look, about 75% of your content for your assessments is in your learner's guide, what we talk about in class, but there's about 25% from time to time, you're going to have to go looking yourself. You're going to have to go to those departments and get some evidence-based data, go to Human Rights Commission, go to Fair Work Australia. You can Google and do some research, but it's only good research if you can back it up and it comes from a credible source. All right. So, and whatever you put in there, if you say I got my information from there. You must copy and paste that website where you got that from as well. And is it current, or are there 5 or 6 new versions and you've got an old one? So make sure you go to a credible space as well. When you do your Google search, it's only ever as good as the questions that you give it. All right. So just say, I want the most current between 2022 and 2025 around something. And then it was like, oh, might spit something out 2023. That'll be the latest one for you. So be really clear what you get Google to do for you. And then give your proof of where you got that you're referencing. Complaints procedure, we have one. Complaints, compliments, and very common in the workplace. We have a suggestion box, actually. Sometimes the staff use it. It's not just for clients. But yeah, like it just, I think it's good that people feel that they've got a voice or they can anonymously raise something. But it's, people are usually emotionally charged for that. So sometimes we've just got to let them approach it in a particular way, and help them find that regulated space. But it's always respectful. We do not know. What we do know is that they were good enough to be able to come to us and give us that opportunity to be able to fix that if we could. The best way is, you know, what would it look like if it was working well for you? And in class tonight, Shanika had mentioned around it's within the scope of your role. It might be a great idea that they've got, but if your funding doesn't say you do that, if your role that you've got doesn't allow you to do that, it's working outside your scope, and if you don't follow policies and procedures, you're working outside the guideline. So we have restraints. Even if you can do something, if your position description says that you don't do that and it's not in there, you don't do it. Or you check with your line manager. This had come up. I'm just wondering, is that, or if we've got someone in-house who's really good at that? And if they go, no, we've got no one, but we refer out. So, well, I do have a bit of a background, but that doesn't mean anything. That might mean that you get to make the phone call to bring the other organisation in. Okay. So just read through your questions really carefully and make sure you get used to saying, inside the scope of my role, I work within that and within the guidelines of the organisation. And usually those guidelines are policies, procedures, and your funding service agreement. Rights and responsibilities. So staff detail what they are: compliant, reporting breaches, outline manage duties, so ensuring adherence and addressing complaints. So a complaint in my organisation, you know, if say the complaint was about us personally, you would like the opportunity to address it, but if they go, no, I'm done talking, then we should have that very clear for people in our information. I like to give everyone a brochure. Absolutely, yep, let me get you someone who can take that call for you or make that appointment. If they're not done targeting that person, you have a responsibility to look after the person that the complaint has been made about. And I felt that the class tonight really covered their rights as well. That's important. You're not there to be doing the investigation. You're there to make sure you work within the law, the legal and the ethical framework, and your organisation's policies and procedures. Who are the key people to go to? So for us, they would go to our CEO in our organisation, and then that would go to the board. The board knows how many complaints are there and how many compliments and testimonies. And Hader has a great one where people can leave 5-star reviews for us on Google, things like that. And they might even say, oh, you know, so-and-so was really great in LSO, or my trainer was really great, and you can say their name. That's a compliment and feedback, positive. A complaint, there's a complaint process. In HADA, our complaints would, in the first step, you take it to the trainer, you might mention it to an LSO, you might say, can you actually put me in touch with someone else as well? You've been helpful, but I'm just actually looking for a little bit more. It would go to our RTO manager, and then the RTO manager handles most things because that's within the scope of their role. But it might be that the CEO would definitely have eyes over it, but they delegate. Our CEO at HADA, they delegate. They've got people in that team that is within the scope of their role to do that. And if we're stuck, we don't have a lot of layers. We can go straight to our CEO about that, but not on little things that you wouldn't bother them with. If you're curious, you can ask a colleague, or you can run it past your line manager as well. Most people don't mind that you're asking questions. So who to go to? HR managers, external. It was an interesting point raised. You can get legal advice. There's several free ones, but Fair Work Australia gives you good advice. And if you are a member of a union, also you can get legal advice. It's part of your membership. They may or may not pick up your case. It depends on what it is. They usually stay away from sexual harassment because that can sit inside the criminal, and so the police would be informed instead of. If you've got a reasonable suspicion that there would be merit to that complaint. How do we make sure that our improvements are implemented in training? Setting up a calendar. We're going to do 12 subjects, 12 agendas, and we're going to do one each month. So describe how the policy will be introduced. That's how we're going to do it. So at HADA, we do monthly meetings and we talk about our training, professional development. We talk about our sector, professional development, and we talk about our KPIs, our key performance indicators. So we run classes every week. We do a certain amount of marking. We're allocated. We are working really hard on having a 24-hour turnaround. We aimed for 48, but we've got a lot of amazing hardworking learners. So we can get 150 overnight. And so we're all furiously trying to do that and the other things that we do. But it's a KPI, and it's a measure. You've got to measure everything. A policy is about how we measure, and a KPI is how we measure. And when you're sitting one-on-one with your line manager, you're actually having those conversations with them about, they'll go, well, here are all your duties and your responsibilities, and I want to be able to unpack, here are the things I think you're really great at, and here are the things that I think you could improve on. So tonight I shared that I get feedback sometimes because I'm a neurodivergent, and people don't always understand me. And so those who are comfortable with me will just say, I just ask you to clarify it, or I don't get what you mean. What are you trying to say here? When you do that, we talked about the emotional bank that we have. So we make deposits and we build on that. But then there's times where we people will make withdrawals. So we've got to get that emotional balance right. We've also got to be mindful about what kind of pressure someone's under, and is this the appropriate time to be raising something as well. I don't mind at all when someone gives me that feedback, because if I don't understand, I want someone to show me how, and if I'm not clear, then I want someone to ask me again. But I also know that it's not my problem. It is, what does that person need to better understand a person that is diverse? And so the same as, I used to say, how do I address you if you're in a wheelchair? And just say, just wheelchair user. Oh, okay, great. So ask the person directly, what's a better way of doing this? Or I get stuck. So I can circle back and say, have I made myself clear? But as a neurodivergent, I will always hover in that that higher level, and a lot of data and that comes into that space when the answer I give might be more than what they were actually asking as well. So just bringing that in, but I need the other person to say that. I need them to say, I didn't really understand, and it's my job to say which bit. So you don't take it personally, I don't. But, you know, it only ever comes down to two things in the workplace. They either can't or they won't. And if they can't, then let me show you how. And if you won't, help me understand what's happening for you. That's it. And then you work from there. That's where the implementation and training comes in. And then maybe doing some reviews around the policies and procedures and the rights of somebody in the workplace. So we can't say to someone, it's how you say it. So we can't say to someone who's got English as another language, I don't understand what you're saying. You know, why don't you, you know, it doesn't make sense. You can't say that to someone who's got English as a second language or a third or a fourth language any more than you can say it to a neurodivergent. I don't understand what you're saying. That just means that person doesn't understand, and so they need more education or training around that. If you're in a diverse workforce, which by law you must be, then what do they know about that? And the best way to do that is, what is the best way to be able to work with you? What are the things that work well? And if you're in a team, part of it, you share that. If you're leading a team, you're doing diploma, you're going to be team leader, you're going to be recognised for program manager. You may not have staff under you, but you definitely will be running your own programs or be viewed as that as you get through with your studies. So you need to have a voice, and you need to have a voice for those inside the team. So any updates we've got to make, document it, make sure that it's reviewed. Sometimes in your policies, you'll have a footer and a header, and it'll be, this is from 2025 till 2026. So that means it needs to get done, and there might be a signature. It might be 3 signatures that have to be signed off on that, or 2. The board might sign it and the CEO might sign it. And that's when you come in and get audited, they want to view when was the last time that was reviewed and where is your evidence that you did do that. So you can have wonderful policies and procedures. They're super shiny and they're all color-coded. But if there's no evidence that that has been implemented, then it's not worth the paper that it's written on. It's just good to have. What must not go into them is being too vague, where people have got to fill in the gaps themselves. So it could be misinterpreted. Oh, well, nobody told me that. Well, it's in your policies. Well, it's not really clear. You know, like, would it be wise to do something? Is for that person, yeah, actually, I do think it would be wise to do it. So that implies that you've got a choice. Some things we don't have a choice around. So that's why it can't be ambiguous, open to interpretation. If it's exclusionary, where we talk mostly him or her, we often apply they or them, or the team will, you know, rather than that, or all staff will, all management will, all stakeholders, all preferred providers. So you might even have someone comes in and fixes a blocked toilet in the building where you are, and the clients use it. Well, that person can't just come on site, can't just call a plumber and say, hey, we've got a blocked toilet. They've got to apply to come in. You've got to protect everybody in that building. So they have to sign off on it, and they have to meet the quality frameworks that sit around that. So they then become an authorized service provider. Don't put in the stuff that doesn't really matter. You know, like unrelated policies and procedures. But when you're writing yours, if you think this, at the end of it, you can say, this can be read also with, and put a few of them in that may be relevant. When you go into First Access and you're looking up policies and procedures, and there's lots of them, just have a look at it, and it'll actually give you, it may give you 4 or 5 other policies and procedures. How First Access have them written is a great way for you to think. So you just go in and have a look, and there's plenty prepared earlier for you to jump in. So, and then don't make it authoritarian or arbitrary, you know, or negative. Just see if it is building up education, professional development, ongoing improvement. That continuous improvement is a big part of a solid culture. Our checklist around our scope. There's some good terms. They're not enough, by the way. When you write your policy, you'll build on them. They're good stepping off points for you, in your own words. Scroll down a little bit for you. And you can stop and pause this recording. I'll get this converted for everyone into a YouTube. So the complaints procedure is walk through how employees can report concerns. So give them a step down through it, like dot points, and it has to have a flow in sequence. First thing we do is this, then this, the forms that you might need for something like that, the key people to contact. You might say something like, if you ever feel uncomfortable or see unfair treatment, here's how you can speak up safely. So you give some terms around that. Tonight I talked a little bit about sandwiching. So there might be, I'll call them arrows that people might fire off. It could be completely unrelated, but for whatever reason, they've decided that they're just going to shoot a few arrows out there. You know, like who's in their target when that's happening, not okay. But if we say nothing, it's almost like a silent permission. That's why it was very ambiguous. Now it sits under workplace health and safety in every state and territory, psychological safety, except Victoria. You're still working under another one if you sit in that state, but go and have a look. Just search it. Which state and territories have psychological safety that sits in under their workplace health and safety legislation? That's the question that you ask, and it'll spit out everybody, and Victoria will just say pending. But I looked that up a week ago, so maybe they've done something in Victoria this week. So always check that your information is valid, relevant, current. So there's some good key points that I've put in here for you. Each one of these is stepping off the template that we give you. So it says, you know, here's how you can speak up safely. You know, give examples, put some dot points in there. Make sure that it's private, but nobody overhears. Think about that. Go into First Access and have a look at their complaints procedure and policy. So a policy is what people expect of you. The procedure is how they expect you to do that and implement it. Policies and procedures, that I call them P&Ps, but that's that acronym for you. Just shorthand kind of writing. So rights and responsibilities. If you have worked in different organisations, you might find that some things are the same. Everything that's statutory will be the same and legislated, but then internally you might have a particular way that you work with your clients. So we transport clients, we have a transport policy. We might go to people's homes, we have a home site policy, and then we have the procedures around that, and then how we document what we did as well, and how we do our file notes, and how we communicate that over, and how we store that information. That's the procedure. Okay, I know what I've got to do now. Procedure is, tell me how I've got to do it. You're writing a policy, the what. But you can put in good policy, can put in the examples. So describe how the policy will put into action and how training helps. Looks after people who are new for onboarding, and it's a refresher for people who have been there for some time. That's policy review. Are these up to date? Are they helpful? We need to know. We ask our team to do that. You might be expected, but if you can see an error in there, then feed that up. Oh, employee suggestion box. It's a living document, which means we will continually review it. Like I said, you can have on the footer of yours when you write it. This will be reviewed. This was created on this. It might be in draft, waiting for the board to sign off on as well. You can add those things in at what state you're up to in that phase. And then related policies and contact details, usually at the end. And then insert them in here, what the legislation and the policies and procedures under here that we abide by, human rights, Geneva Convention of Children and Young People. That's actually written into our code. So we have a governance guide as well, and that's where management sit in under that around compliance. And in wrapping up, we did some breakout room. We had some really great discussions that came out of the 3 rooms that we set up. We had some team leaders, and I want to thank our team leaders, Rachel and Dardie and Michelle tonight. And you know that we like to rotate that around, but and of course, yeah, heading out to work placement as well. So it's an amazing group that we have on our Diploma of Community Services on Thursday night, where we are very much into peer support, and there's some great suggestions and good connection. If you don't come to classes in real time, then you can access the Discord group and find people to do some role plays with when it says you need to do this with a peer. But study buddies are wonderful as well. So it's good to connect and support each other, even if you're not quite sure on the answers. Well, then you both are in exactly the same spot. But you can also directly ask questions. Your learner support officers, though it's not instant, and there could be some delays. They're very busy in that space. But as your trainer, I invite you, you can contact me on email. It's very rare that I would have my auto reply that I'm not available. So I will get to that, but please make sure you remind me if you haven't heard back from me, please. I appreciate and I really do value that. Thanks. So we did a little bit more around the Kelly and Thomas one. We went in to one big brainstorm group, which a few people popped in. So it was like 2 groups and then lots of discussion, and then all came together in the end. And there was great insight over that. And then other people, well, let's find out a little bit more information. So that was a session as well, which was about task 2, the dilemma, one of the cases there where there's Kelly and Thomas. And it was in the group, they brought back some rich findings. I really liked how the alleged victim, the alleged offender, and the organisation, they looked at all 3 components, which is what CHCLEG003 is all about, all the legal and the ethical framework. I know that in the third case, there was a real ethical dilemma where mates in the workplace trying to help out their buddies. And so they didn't think enough about the legal side, but the ethical one was, oh, I've got to stick up for my friend. This is terrible. And in their mind, they thought they were actually doing the right thing. But they did the wrong thing very well, but they still did the wrong thing if it's found that they actually did do that. And then we didn't have time for any of our other little things, but next week we'll kick it off with, we'll do a bit of policy scavenger hunting, and we'll go and find what are going to be those supporting policies and procedures around it. We're going to make sure that everyone can get into their first access site. So we're going to have a look at that. I'm going to share it, show you how I navigate that space. I'm in there all the time as well. Some great templates and really good dashboard. Excellent resource. Hader have really got a great quality there, and our learner guides are excellent as well. And then what you're going to need, you're going to need not so much copies of the policy document, but you will need to know how to find them, and you can download some of those into your own system. We're going to next week have a look at some commitment statements that you're going to take to promote equal opportunities in your role. You may not be in the workplace, but I want you to think about what you would do. And then statements like, I will actively encourage diversity in team projects, and how I will do this, we'll expand on that. I will intervene if I see or hear discrimination, and how you're going to do that. And I'm going to ask each of you to be doing that as well. So we'll work a little bit more on what are the a couple of places to go and have a look at who do have an EEO policy template or a sample, an example, and you're getting this recording. So there's some, but you might have another one. And that's what you're looking for when you do your search. And these examples showcase best practices for our sector for creating an inclusive and legally compliant EEO policy. Right, so I will step off from that next week, next Thursday, if I don't hear from you in between. So have an amazing week, and we will see you back here for our Diploma of Community Services, and it will be our final week on this unit, the CHCLEG003. So thanks everyone, have a terrific week, and we'll see you next Thursday.